Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast.
Still have the door open to them. Torrey Craig triggering the inbound. Get to the Shamet. Corner three. Registers the three-point hit. Landry Shamet. Have yourself a day, young fella.
Welcome to The Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here, as always, with Sam. Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Another several wins in the books. Some of them very, very easy over the past week. Say Chicago, for instance. Some of them a little bit more difficult and frustrating, like last night against Sacramento. But we are here. The Phoenix Suns continue to persevere through all of their injury updates. And, in fact, we're starting to receive some good news now.
Yeah, I was looking at the standings, and the Phoenix Suns currently have the longest win streak in the NBA. Were you aware of this?
I was not.
Isn't that crazy? No,
I knew it was five. I knew it was 5 in a row.
5 in a row, and the next is the Minnesota Timberwolves, who the Suns play next, right? So they could go into that game as I think the Timberwolves have a game between now and then, so both teams could go into that game on a 5-game win streak, which would be really interesting. The Timberwolves have played essentially the best since the All-Star break, so kind of surprising. I mean, I guess maybe more surprising to me than to you, but I do think they're a little bit of schedule luck with some of their wins, so it'll be interesting to see, as that could be a preview for the first round of the playoffs.
I'll just say, I like the Timberwolves, and I've thought for a while, they're great and whatever, but I didn't foresee them having the best offense in the NBA since like February 1st or whatever it's been. Like they've been clicking on a different level.
They're 42
in the second
and 30
half of the season. Yeah, they're really good.
Pretty crazy.
They're really good. I mean, they passed Denver, at least as of today.
Yeah,
they're tied with Denver, but they have the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
so they're sitting there in the 6th seed.
Yeah,
and I don't know,
Denver.
man. That wait, what did you say?
Denver, I was just going to mention that when Denver was playing the Celtics, Michael Malone benched the entire starting group for the second half. I mean, that is a team that's in turmoil right now. Yeah.
No, especially with the news that Jamal Murray probably won't return. We don't know about Michael Porter Jr. either. I mean, that's a team it's kind of crazy. But with Minnesota, man, Golden State's a really, really, really tough first round matchup for them. Not going to lie, if they stay in the 6th seed. But if they somehow manage to weasel their way out of that specific matchup, there are a lot of other teams in the Western Conference that I think they could match up pretty well with. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I don't really it could be Dallas, it could be Utah, it could be Memphis. The way Minnesota's playing right now, I think there's a chance they could take any of them. So they're an interesting one to look out for, and hopefully we'll see some more illuminating details potentially come out in that matchup on Wednesday.
I am almost thinking that the Golden State-Dallas 4-5 matchup is something that's going to happen at this point with Golden State not having Steph Curry. They could drop pretty easily down to that 4th spot with Utah passing them. Utah, who has been playing well lately, have, they're 6-4 in their last 10, so they haven't been as hot as they were previously. But I could see Utah passing Golden State if Golden State loses a couple here, which would be a fascinating matchup with Golden State and Dallas in the first round. Basically, anything that we thought could happen like 10 games ago has changed. Now we have Minnesota in the top 6 out of the play-in entirely. Golden State is dropping fast. Memphis is probably going to keep that number 2 spot at this point, and who knows what the brackets are going to look like. And at the end of this podcast, or later on in this podcast, I should say, we're going to break down who we think is going to get minutes. The actual playoff rotations for the Phoenix Suns. So obviously, we didn't even plan to talk about playoffs off the bat here, Sam. So obviously, it's on the mind for us. It's just we're so close to the playoffs at this point that it's just on the mind constantly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 10 games left, and it's kind of all you're thinking about. Like, in that, we could talk about this Kings game, you know, in more detail, and there were some interesting things that happened. But, like, just my experience generally last night as I was watching the Kings game, when Jay Crowder went down, for instance, his first game back, he plays 2 quarters. He goes up for a shot. I forget who it was. Someone sticks the leg under, and he lands wrong. Who was it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Barnes or maybe or Lyles?
Barnes or Lyles. I think I remember you saying Trey Lyles is on the list. Maybe it was Trey Lyles. I have to go back and look at the possession. But yeah, so now, you know, we still haven't received an update on Jay Crowder over or close to 24 hours later now as we record this. And it's like those are the types of moments this late into the season that you just think, fuck, like can we just fast forward to the playoffs? Because frankly, these final 10 games, we could find things to talk about from week to week, and there are always patterns and there are always trends. But, you know, a lot of that stuff is inconsequential in the grand scheme, and we're trying to win a championship here. So I think we're going to spend the bulk of this episode talking about some of the most consequential stuff we can think about as it relates to playoff basketball.
Quickly on the Sacramento game, there's 2 things I would want to talk about from that game. One, Landry Shamet is playing well now. Since the All-Star break, he's shooting relatively well. Let me actually check his actual stats currently.
45% from deep in March.
Yeah, 45%. Yeah, that's awesome. Obviously, he's playing really well as far as shooting. The defense is still there. The confidence appears to be growing, and I think that's the biggest issue for him because oftentimes I think he was hesitating for certain shots, dribbling maybe when he shouldn't. Actually, kind of mirrors when Cameron Johnson first came onto this team his rookie year. He wasn't exactly sure how to fit, when to shoot, when to drive, when to actually contest, things like that. And I think it's coming back for Landry Shamet. Obviously, he hit what essentially mounted to the game winner of that game, which was obviously a huge shot for him. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was Mikal Bridges, who has been playing extremely well. After the game, Monty Williams, and I think this is the first time he said it just this plainly, he started his press conference with, first of all, Mikal Bridges should be the Defensive Player of the Year, and then went on to describe all of the reasons that Mikal should be the Defensive Player of the Year this year. And I think, to some extent, and I don't even think we've talked about it here on the podcast, that narrative is growing a little bit, and I think there's a chance that he's going to get some votes, right?
Yeah, I think he's going to get some votes. I'll start off by saying that comment from Monty surprised me because Monty supports his guys. Obviously, he's well liked for a reason. He goes to bat for his guys, but he doesn't focus on the kind of superficial award races that we tend to think of, right? Like I can't necessarily remember instances of him just saying, maybe if he's asked, he'll go to bat for his guys, but he doesn't. This felt different. This felt intentional, like an intentional call out from Monty Williams to go out of his way to say, yes, Mikal Bridges is the Defensive Player of the Year. That felt like a change in strategy to me. Like he was really trying to will it into existence in a way that we don't.
It was like Doc Rivers almost.
Yes. Yeah. We don't typically see that from Monty. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Now, as for the narrative thing, right, because that was the second part of your point, talking about is the narrative actually increasing. I think it's funny because I would say yes and I would say no. I think in select places, like really select small circles of the internet, I am seeing an increase in interest in Mikal Bridges and an increase in interest in his Defensive Player of the Year campaign specifically. But overwhelmingly, if you look at the betting odds, it's still in favor of weird candidates. I think Giannis and Gobert, it makes sense if they're at the top of their lists. I'm seeing guys like Bam Adebayo at the top of betting odds. I'm seeing guys like Jaren Jackson Jr. at the top of betting odds. And I think overwhelmingly, we still continue to run up against. I remember when we had JJ on about a month ago, and I asked him this question about the prevailing logic of bigs being a defensive anchor because bigs dictate a system, whereas this is at least the theory, right? Bigs dictate your entire defensive system, whereas wing players take the best assignment, whatever, but at best they're only taking out one guy at a time, whereas a big takes out everyone at a time, supposedly. That's the idea behind like rim gravity and all these guys who can move their feet super well and do all this shit. So that's what we're running up against is Mikal Bridges is having a hell of a season. Kellen Olson on Twitter just posted a terrific stat, which is the fact that Mikal now leads the league in total minutes played this season. He is officially the NBA's greatest Iron Man as of today, March 21st. He's logged the most minutes, but also the second part of that stat being that he's logged the most defensive miles on the season, which I thought was an interesting find from Kellen, that he has literally traveled the most distance. I think this was per game too, so this was not a total stat. But on a per game basis, is the guy who is moving the most on defense, because that's an actual tracking stat that is available on the NBA's website.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting as well. It's not like one of these advanced impact defensive stats that you think of that are like regressed however many times with all these, statistics concepts, but the impact is pretty clear to anyone who watches with the eye test. It's just, can you actually get people to get over this hump of believing that it needs to go to a big man every single year? I don't know if you're going to get the necessary votes to fulfill, like, to complete that hurdle. I just don't know if it's possible.
No, I think you're right. I think he's absolutely right.
To return just real quick to your original question, to the original question, it's growing. The momentum is there. He's going to get votes. If it's a question of is he going to win, I don't think he's going to win. That's my honest
There's
opinion.
definitely not going to be a unanimous winner, right? The votes are going to be split
not this year. Not this year.
And I think that's an interesting thing. And as far as Mikal's case, I think one of the other things that is in his favor is that DeAndre Ayton has missed games. JaVale McGee has missed games. Jay Crowder has missed games. And the Suns have had a great defense throughout all of that. And Mikal Bridges plays every single one of those games. And there's got to be something said about that. I mean, at the very least, Draymond Green has missed a bunch of games. Rudy Gobert has missed games. Mikal misses none. So obviously that's a huge thing. The other part is he can stay on the floor because his offense is good, which I don't know doesn't count, but it does matter.
There's
compared to like Matisse.
Yeah, no, for sure compared to Matisse. There are a couple of things that I want to respond to there, though. First being that Draymond has missed way too many games. You're right. Yeah. He just has. However, with Gobert, it's kind of interesting because I think Gobert has missed 15-ish games. Maybe it was 16 games this season, which is a decent amount. But I actually went back and looked. Did you know that in the first year that Rudy won his first Defensive Player of the Year award, he only played 56 games? Have we talked about this on the pod already? I feel like I'm having deja vu.
No, I don't think. Well, if we have, I don't remember.
That's fine. I can't remember if I brought this up before. I've definitely tweeted about it, but now I'm questioning. It's one of those things. Maybe I said it on a playback stream or something. Right. But I had to go back and check the voting records because I just didn't believe that someone could miss 20 or 25 games and still win this award. In fact, there is precedent for it because Gobert did it back in, I think it was the 2016-17 season. If not that, it was the 2017-18 season. But one of his first years, his first year winning that award, he played 56 games, still won the award, which is pretty damn amazing. And you know what? The year after that, he came back, played 81 games out of 82, so he only missed one. But because of the voter fatigue effect, he still won the award. But his voter share, his first place share, the percent of voters who gave him a first place vote went down from like 95% or almost unanimous to like 60%, which just goes to show how powerful an effect voting fatigue actually is. And maybe that's going to affect Gobert this year. I mean, certainly the Jazz aren't even a top 10 defense as of today.
Right.
Maybe it's going to affect Giannis as well. But even if it affects those two guys specifically, like I said, there's still Bam, there's still Jaren Jackson Jr., there's still these other guys that are getting propped up in the race, and they're always big men. They just always are.
Right.
So that is what Mikal is up against.
Yeah.
Like, if Mikal... Try not to be too melodramatic here. If Mikal wins this award, does it like revolutionize our understanding of the Defensive Player of the Year award in some sense? That might be a little. Might be a little bit too dramatic because Kawhi did win that 1 year back in the day, but it feels like one of those years where logically he has to be an underdog for all of these reasons that I've stated, and but maybe it's his time.
I think to some extent it would be acknowledging the fact that we still are not good at quantifying defense.
And let me,
if Mikal wins,
we're terrible at it. And by the way, I posted something.
We are.
I posted something about Mikal the other day with regard to this award on Twitter, and there were some people who were arguing with me just about the advanced numbers, the defensive Raptor and EPM and RPM and all those stats. And it's like, I want to have some level of faith in those numbers, and I do. But then, like, if I literally go to a leaderboard, right? And on the one hand, here you have Monty Williams, who is he's the front runner for Coach of the Year. We'd be shocked if he didn't win Coach of the Year. And Monty Williams understands the game of basketball enough to know that it's going to be Mikal Bridges who takes the toughest defensive assignment on any given night. And he's going to use a guy like Jay Crowder as a useful off-ball nail help defender. But Jay also understands that, Jay Crowder being tough and gritty and switchable and all these other positive defensive qualities is not the best defender on the Suns, right? The reason I point that out is because then if you go to some of these leaderboards where it's actually trying to quantify the defensive impact of these guys in one raw stat, you'll find places, and I can't remember if it was EPM or RPM, I think it was EPM, but you'll find advanced stats that say Jay Crowder is a 99th percentile top 10 defender in the NBA. Oh, and by the way, Mikal Bridges, he's only 85th or something like that. And it's just, I can't begin to wrap my head around how you get to, I can understand how you get to those numbers. I just can't understand how you can put stock in them at that point if that's the output.
Exactly.
So there are always outliers in those every year, but they're just fundamentally too flawed to rely on in a race like this. I think they're useless. So that's my
if anyone's arguments about awards or how good players are 100% dependent on those stats and never come to the conclusion or at least acknowledge the fact that maybe the way that we quantify how good players are is wrong, then they're just flawed. They're starting from a flawed place to start, and that's the case. And look, I'm not even necessarily at this point making the case that Mikal Bridges deserves Defensive Player of the Year. I don't feel like I watch enough of other teams to come to that conclusion, but I do know that what he does in guarding the best player on the other team essentially every single night, unless it's Embiid or Jokic, then that matters a lot for a team that's as good as they are. And those players will still score. And I think that's the main difference is he's guarding players that are the best players for a reason. That means that they're still going to get buckets every once in a while, and that's probably what affects his overall numbers. Right.
Yeah, no, for sure. And look, here's the final concession I'll make is that if Mikal Bridges does somehow win Defensive Player of the Year against all odds this year, it's a weak year. We can admit it. Like, it's a weak year for the field. If Draymond plays 82 games this season or 75 games or whatever, I would give it to Draymond. I would vote for him. I just would. Because for a while there, the Warriors, when he was in the lineup, had a defensive rating of like 95, and that was him. It wasn't anyone else. Yeah. So it's like if Mikal wins, there were special circumstances that allowed him to win. I'm willing to admit that. But given those circumstances being what they are, the various injuries, the various teams that you would expect to be in the top 10 that aren't in the top 10, I don't know. Just feels like maybe we could flip the logic a little bit. We'll see.
Quick news. Sam Amick of The Athletic wrote a story about Chris Paul. Yeah, that's the good one. Wrote a story about Chris Paul that said that his injury is progressing faster than expected and that he could be back as early as this Wednesday against Minnesota, which is remarkable. It does sound like that it's not going to be the playoffs at this point. I think I will go ahead and ignore this Wednesday thing because, he's still wearing a cast. I worry that he's trying to get back a little earlier than necessary. I do understand that Chris Paul is capable of sort of playing slightly hampered, but at this point, they're fine. They can go 5-5, literally play 500 ball, and still end up with the greatest record in Suns history at this point. Chris Paul could take a few more games off. I think Minnesota is a little early. Maybe give it a few more games and come back. At the very least, maybe Philadelphia on Sunday or something like that. Maybe not as early as that, but it is news. I think that at the very least,
it's huge news. It's huge news.
Of course, that he appears to be doing well, and I think this was expected. We talked about it, all the spy cam footage of him shooting shots at practice, and apparently before a game recently, he spent the entire pregame doing essentially his normal warm up routine that he does for games. So he looks a lot better, and obviously this is as good as possible for the Suns. Now, we still, of course, need a Cameron Johnson update. We still, of course, need a Jay Crowder update. But starting right now with the Chris Paul update is fantastic. So that's good news for the Suns.
It's very good. I don't know exactly what his motivations are for wanting to return as early as Wednesday. Is it just because he's a sicko? Yeah, I
think it is.
It's probably 90. That's probably 90% of it. But I guess, in terms of, is it more about, because the Suns, we've talked about this, I think on like Playback or a Patreon episode or something, just the stretch they're about to play is insane. They're really good teams. They're going to play Minnesota, Denver. This is not in order, by the way. I'm not looking at the schedule, but they're going to play Minnesota, Denver, Philly, Golden State, Memphis, and Utah, all before the season closes. That's basically everyone that you're afraid of seeing in a final series, except for like Milwaukee and maybe Boston now. It's like every other good team in the league. So
and I believe Philadelphia is the only home game in that stretch.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really hard. So you say they just have to go 5-5. Well, if they're playing without Chris Paul, 5-5 against those teams, like, I know they've been killing it recently, but that's not easy. But that being said, is Chris's motivation, he specifically wants to look at these specific teams, or is he just thinking about ramping up for the playoffs and he really doesn't give a shit who the opponent is? I have a feeling with Chris, he would approach a game against the Oklahoma City Thunder the same way as a game against the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Golden State Warriors or whoever else he's about to play. So I really don't know. You're probably right. He just wants to return as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. Just don't push it.
Yeah,
I
just want him to be healthy for the playoffs.
If you need a minutes restriction, like 24 minutes for a few games, like, he's not going to ask for it. Maybe you got to force it on him, but I wouldn't complain about that. So we'll see. It's definitely good news, though, to sum up. Excited
to watch him play soon. I just want to mention a quick stat that I looked up out of curiosity. The NBA players this season with the most 30-point games with less than 10 free throw attempts, LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker. Those are the players with the most 30-point games with less than 10 free throw attempts. Devin Booker has made it somewhat of a talking point that he's made attempts to get more calls driving to the rim, and he's not getting them. Still not a ton of free throws shot in his most recent games. I looked up that stat. I thought it was pretty interesting. It's actually kind of interesting to compare Devin Booker's stats in like post All-Star break to LeBron. He's basically LeBron now. Like 28 points per game, 7 assists. LeBron maybe gets a few more rebounds, but
specifically,
like
specifically 37-year-old LeBron.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of jumpers. Yeah. Because I was just going to say, like, isn't it insane that LeBron James is in that list, and that that also tells us is that
he doesn't do what he used to do. Yeah,
LeBron has successfully transformed his game enough to still be a 30-point per game scorer despite not getting to the free throw line anymore. That's awesome. That's like what takes most guys out of the league, and he can still do it.
The way the list changes when you take the free throw attempts out, though, because it's like Joel Embiid is, of course, like way at the top of the list of the 30-point scorers. And then you take out the idea of less than 10 in Giannis, Joel Embiid, John Morant, who shoots a lot of free throws as well. Trae Young shoots a lot of free throws as well. These guys drop completely down on that list. Guys like LeBron, Jason Tatum, and Devin Booker rise to the top. Devin Booker is something like 6th or 7th in the league for 30-point games so far this season, and has done it essentially, along with those other two guys, with the least amount of free throws possible.
On tough buckets only. And that is why, my friend, I don't know if you saw this, but there's only one member of the media that I've seen who's been fearless enough to stand up.
Oh, no.
What? Who's been... No, I mean, I'm just saying, there's only been one guy I've seen who's been fearless enough to stand up to the general narrative and say Devin Booker should be near or at the top of people's MVP leaderboards. There's only one person that I've seen say it on the national level. Do you know who that is?
Who is that?
That's the Ball Don't Stop Twitter account, because I don't know. Did you see this video? Did you see him talking about it?
I didn't watch it, so I didn't listen to him talk, but it's the same account that said that if the Lakers could be healthy and get the Suns in the first round, then that's going to be a tougher series for the Suns than people think.
He did say that. I'll put it this way. He may or may not have said word for word in that snippet that this game is and always will be about getting buckets. So as a form of his analysis. So there you have it. I mean, he's attracting an audience right now with what Booker is doing. He's attracting a certain audience, an audience who understands and respects bucket getting at all costs, no matter the shot difficulty. And does that mean he should be at the top of people's MVP leaderboards? I mean, look, I've basically accepted at this point that it's going to one of the three people that people always talk about. It's going to one of Jokic, Embiid, or Giannis. You can pout about it, you can whine about it, but it's going to one of those three guys. That's not going to stop. Yes.
One of the three guys that are going to have significantly less wins than the Suns.
You're correct. And that's why let me finish the point. Let me finish the point before people jump down my throat. That's why I have also brought up what would it take? Like recently I was lobbing onto the timeline hypotheticals of, well, they've won this many games. If they win out,
right.
Does it take
what's that, 67 wins? Right,
60. Yeah, if they won out, it would be 68, which would be insane given the run that we were just talking about. But
one
it's
of the best records of all time.
You know, at first it was like, well, okay, 60 wins and the season Booker is having, that's not enough. What about 64 wins? What about 66 wins? What about 68 wins when the next best team has 54? Something ridiculous, you know? Just throwing hypotheticals out there. I think it's clear at this point that no one's going to take the bait. Like, the people just don't care. Especially if Chris Paul comes back now, by the way. They're just not going to. But all NBA is a different conversation. That's probably more or less a lock.
I think it's nice at the very least that the Suns have now destroyed the narrative that their success is entirely due to Chris Paul. Because I think that's gone now. And I think people, if they bring it up, the Suns are going to have a very, very easy stretch of basketball to point at. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's break down playoff rotations. We'll be right back.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Hand-picked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
All right, playoffs are coming. The Suns have a lot of players currently getting minutes thanks to injuries and various reasons, but they're going to have to cut that down. They're going to have to cut that down pretty significantly. So we wanted to come onto this podcast, specifically you, Sam, to start breaking down what the playoff rotations are going to look like. What do you think?
Look, I advocated for this as a conversation, but I think you wanted to do it too.
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I didn't have to push that hard.
No,
because
it's a good idea.
Like I said earlier, we're 10 games away. Everyone's thinking about the playoffs. And here's the other thing. While the Suns have had a lot of injuries recently, I think Suns fans have maybe forgot that when you finally do have a fully healthy roster here again, which hopefully they do, we're waiting on Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder updates. But if you get a fully healthy roster for game 1, there's a plethora of good basketball players on this team. There are simply too many, and not everyone will get minutes. And so I think it's time we talked about it. And so I think what we're going to do here, Mike, I'll establish the parameters. I want to go in a few different stages. The first thing that I suggest we do, and tell me if you disagree with this, we can take it in another direction if you wish. But the first thing I think we should do is a little history lesson of going back into last year and helping to contextualize what the situation is this year by focusing on last year's roster first. You cool with that?
That's a good idea. That's exactly what I did when researching. So let's start there.
Okay, let's start with last year's finals team. which really, if you go back and look at that playoff run, what you will find,
Right.
and of course, some guys played certain games and then missed other games, and some guys got injured at the end, and so we'll cover all that. But in general, there were 9 guys who logged real minutes for the Suns in the playoffs last year. By real minutes, I mean non-blowout minutes. There were a couple other guys who averaged 2 minutes per game. We're not counting them.
Thanks to the Nuggets, yeah.
We're talking about 9 guys. Specifically, if you go to the final series, which I think is the most consequential of all.
Oh, okay.
I'll just start there only because it's
No,
one
I like
thing.
that.
It's one thing to talk about the Lakers series or the Nuggets series, but
Yeah.
I think there's a certain value in just stripping the roster down to its most essential pieces and thinking about, if they're going to go all the way again this year, which we know is the ultimate goal, what are exactly the most essential pieces? So I think there is value in that, especially because you can kind of get some insight maybe into what Monty is thinking about that too. Of course, it's speculation, what we're about to do, but that's the goal. So the 9 guys who played minutes in the final series last year: Chris Paul, Devin Booker. I should have brought up the list because I don't actually have the list here. But it's here. Hold on, let me find it real quick because I don't want to slip up.
Well, let me mention just while you're doing that, because I was also looking at the general playoff minutes as well, and it was kind of interesting to look that the Suns played a total amount of 22 games in the playoffs last year. 22 games total, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players played all 22 games.
Yeah.
Chris Paul, of course, missed some games
Right.
due to COVID. Cameron Johnson, I forgot about this, missed a game. I think it was a Clippers series with an illness. He was sick, non-COVID at the time. But those 6 players, Cameron Payne, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, and the 6th player, Torrey Craig.
Yep.
All 22 games in the playoffs last year.
Yes, but I do think it gets a little bit interesting once you get to the finals because there were some twists and turns that I want to remind people of. So here, the 9 players who consistently played in the finals were Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul, Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, Torrey Craig, and Frank Kaminsky. Those were the 9 guys.
Yeah.
However, on a game-by-game basis, gets a little bit more interesting because if you remember, ideally, Frank Kaminsky was not supposed to play in that series at all. Dario Saric was supposed to play in that series. Game 1, 2 minutes in, Dario Saric goes down. At that point, from games 1 through 3, the counter to that for the Suns, because Dario was not logging a ton of minutes at that point. He was obviously not going to be an ideal defensive matchup for the Bucks to begin with.
Right.
But he was going to play 10 minutes in backing up DeAndre Ayton. That was going to be his role. Games 1 through 3, what Monty decided to do was just keep the 9-man rotation, have Torrey Craig playing the minutes that he played, and just swap out Dario's minutes for Frank minutes. So that's what they did games 1 through 3. They ran a 9-man rotation. Games 4 and 5 is where things changed. Games 4 and 5, they cut Frank Kaminsky out of the rotation. They stripped it down to just an 8-man rotation because Frank Kaminsky was struggling in this series, as we all remember. He's, great at many other things, a connector in the offense. Defensively was not providing the value that the Suns wanted. So game 4 was where Monty sort of pulled the plug on that and went down to an 8-man rotation, which is Craig as more of a small ball center and DeAndre Ayton absorbing some of those center minutes to play as much as he possibly could. So at that point, 8-man rotation, the only guys coming off the bench were Cameron Payne, Cameron Johnson, and Torrey Craig until the do or die ultimate, Giannis 50-ball game 6, where again Monty decided to not call an audible, but made another change, and he ran an 8-man rotation again. But this time he played Torrey Craig less than 1 minute. I think Craig was only subbed in for a couple of key possessions and gave most of those minutes back to Frank Kaminsky again at the backup center position. So
and then after the playoffs, said that he regretted not playing Frank Kaminsky more. Actually, he referenced playing him more. And probably, I think at this point, we could come to the conclusion that he may have meant dual big lineups, which the Suns have now used against the Bucks in multiple games this season.
Very possible, and I think that's good analysis. Overall, what are the lessons that we can learn from the finals? The Suns played 8 to 9 guys the entire series, right? So that's the first thing. Just, I don't think there are many people listening here who are complete new fans of the Suns who did not even witness the playoff series last year. Like, I think last year we did a whole lot of kind of spiels to people about, oh, this is what playoff basketball is going to be like if you haven't watched before. Now I think Suns fans are used to playoff basketball, so I think it's a little bit different. But just in case you forgot, 8 or 9 man rotations in the playoffs are very, very typical. In fact, if you look at the Bucks across the aisle, what they were doing, they started the finals with an 8-man rotation. By the time they needed to win their games to close out the series, they scaled down to a 7-man rotation.
7-man, yeah.
In Game 6, they eliminated, because he fucking sucked, let's be honest, Jeff Teague, who was the 8th man in their rotation in that series. They got rid of all of Jeff Teague's minutes. Jrue Holiday played 46 and a half minutes in Game 6 to close out for the Bucks. He averaged 43 minutes per game in that series, which is something that I forgot about until I looked it up. Just to point out again that when it comes down to the last series, the final hurdle to win that trophy, you can talk about ideal minutes distributions all you want, but starters are going to log a lot of minutes, and there's going to be a lot of this kind of stuff on the margins that disappears, and it disappears fast. Other lessons. Do you have any takeaways from that series besides what we've talked about so far? Just trimming down the rotation in general?
No, I'll be honest. I didn't really think about the overall idea of looking at this through the lens of the NBA Finals. And
That's
part
fine.
Part of that is because, I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. I work with the B-Ball Index to fill out projected playoff rotations for the Phoenix Suns as far as the playoffs goes, and I usually tend to adjust that round by round, or if players go out with injury. So I started off thinking about the rotations as far as the first round alone, and I think that, and we're going to get into it, I'm sure, a lot of the rotations are going to be dependent on certain kinds of matchups, and
Absolutely.
And once again, proof that the Suns can win in different ways. They've won in every way possible this season, including this last game. But yeah, I do think that it depends on specifically the matchups that they're going to end up playing against. But yeah,
Sure.
no, I didn't really think about it through the lens of the finals.
No, and that's fine. I think I'm gonna give you some more, because in the finals, guys were playing 45 minutes per game, and I just wanted to throw that out there to demonstrate to people again that, just as a reminder of that's what was happening. It wasn't, Torrey Craig is not going to play 30 minutes per game in the finals. Not that anyone expected it, but just the rotations get really, really, really tight, and I think people needed a reminder. However, I'm going to throw out some more realistic numbers in a minute. I think what we should do now is let's start by talking about who is absolutely a lock in the playoff rotation from the beginning of round one. In your opinion, let's just solidify a group of guys. I think we're going to have the same exact group of guys.
Right.
But let's just make sure. And then we can use that to make some more assumptions based on prior data that we have about those guys. So, this is my list of locks. Let me know if you disagree with any of this, okay? Chris Paul, lock.
Yes. Yeah.
Devin Booker,
Lock.
Mikal Bridges,
Lock.
Jay Crowder,
Lock.
DeAndre Ayton,
Lock.
Cam Johnson,
Lock.
Cam Payne.
Lock.
That is all I have. Those,
I think that's right. Yeah.
Let me just define it more specifically so that people know what I'm talking about. When I say lock, we just named 7 players.
Right.
In my opinion, those are the only 7 players, if the Suns rotation is fully healthy going into the playoffs, who I think it would have to be something monumental.
Yes.
Would have to change for those 7 players to not log minutes, and real minutes, not blowout
They'll
minutes.
play every game.
They'll play every single game.
They'll play every single game.
They'll play. Yeah.
And that's exactly what I had, and I think you're right, because the other 2 guys that you could talk about at this point that could get minutes, I guess it's 3 guys really, is Torrey Craig, JaVale McGee, and Landry Shamet, right? We're not going to really count anyone beyond that, or
no? I think there's a couple other guys that I think we should take it one by one. But
no, you're right.
I think there's a list of 5 guys. But so okay, just to make sure we're working through it kind of systematically here. So you agree with that concept of 7?
Yes,
right?
I do.
Next, what I want to do is approach it mathematically, because this is going to help you for your B-ball index, frankly, assignment too. So we can actually talk about what the minutes distribution is.
Yes, because that is interesting to look at the minutes from last year. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, have you done that already? Because I've got the numbers here and I can quote.
I have the numbers for the full playoffs. I don't have the finals, but I have the full playoffs, and I think it's interesting.
Okay, so just to remind everyone, there's 5 positions in basketball, in case you didn't know that. There's 48 minutes in a game.
Imagine if they've gotten to this point of our podcast and they didn't know that there were 5 players on the court for each team.
Well, as a matter of fact, there are some blue check marks on NBA Twitter who believe that there are like 13 positions. So, you could talk to different people and they have opinions, but that's neither here nor there. For the purposes of our discussion today, there are 5 positions and there are 48 minutes. 5 times 48 is 240.
240.
Yep. I should have thrown it to you. Sorry. So 240 minutes. What we're going to do first, how many minutes per game did each of these 7 guys play in the playoffs last year? I'm going to list it out now.
Yeah.
Devin Booker played 40 minutes per game.
Which is pretty crazy, right? Just off the bat.
It's a lot, yeah.
40 minutes a game, and it's the right choice by Monty Williams. I think this is what plagued the actual Bucks team until they had to figure it out once they started playing against the Suns, but was not playing your star players enough minutes. There was no problem as far as Devin Booker when it came to Monty Williams' minutes distribution for Devin Booker. And I think you could expect something close to 40 minutes for him this year.
Actually, you know what? I like that you chimed in there just because we're going to tally them all up at the end. But as I go along here, I'm just going to list off every player, and you just give me a quick take of if that feels about right or if something feels awful or awfully off.
Yeah.
Tell me, okay? So Booker played 40 minutes per game last year in the playoffs. Chris Paul played 34 minutes.
Yeah, that feels kind of low. I'll be honest. That's basically what he played in the regular season, right?
You know what? I think the Lakers series may have had slightly something to do with it. Yeah. Remember where he was playing? He was playing with half an arm, but just wasn't logging. Like I think he had some games in the 20s there. If you look at his game logs. But that wouldn't make a huge difference. Like maybe he'd go up to 35 or 36.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I I'm going to pencil in 36 for him right now.
Okay.
As I'm going to write down some expected rotations for me at least, and then we'll review these once you're done going through.
That's fine. DeAndre Ayton played 36 minutes. Per game.
I mean, and that's pretty awesome. Second on the team in minutes was DeAndre Ayton, which I think is important. And I think when you talk about how good DeAndre Ayton was last year, one of the main things that he did well was stay on the court. And there's 2 reasons for him to be able to stay on the court the way he did. One, stayed out of foul trouble, regardless of who the Suns are playing, maybe outside of Giannis, who just barrels into you. And then 2, conditioning. His conditioning was right the entirety of the playoffs that allowed him to, I think in a lot of ways, they talked about it afterwards, he just played through being tired. You just play through being tired. So I think something like that for him, I could even see it going up like a small amount depending on the matchups. You know, obviously in the finals, it ended up going up for him. So that feels about right though.
He played through fatigue because he was motivated by a bag that never came. So we'll see how it goes around on round 2.
Last chance.
But you know what? But I will say, by the way, great point on the lack of fouls. I think it has gone completely under the radar in like national circles and even in local circles. I don't feel like enough of us are talking about it, that actually DeAndre Ayton has lowered his personal foul rate again this season. His career rate through his first 3 seasons was 3.3 fouls per 36 minutes. That was already really good for a starting center, or at least above average for a starting center. This year, he's lowered it once again to 2.8. Now, you could say as a result, he's also blocking the fewest shots of his career, but I think DeAndre has proven by now that the literal process for him of blocking shots does not matter, because if he just stands up straight and absorbs drives and makes an effort to contest without necessarily focusing too much on blocking the actual shot, he still has a presence down low, and more importantly, he's staying on the court. And now that the Nuggets are in the 7th seed, if they somehow end up matched up on the Suns first round, like if you're Jokic, you already know it's not going to be any easier for you on this guy than it was last year. In fact, it's going to be harder because he's even better at staying out of those situations. So
have we ever tied his lack of shot blocking to the lack of foul trouble? Because I've never really considered that. I love that.
Well, I don't think we have, but I think it's just logical. I think it's
because he's not chasing blocks. If you chase blocks, you put yourself in position to potentially foul him more.
Yeah,
if you're not chasing blocks, if you're just playing solid, straight up and down defense, then you're less likely to foul. And the player missing the shot can happen with or without a block. The outcome is the same. That's a really great point.
One does not necessarily always cause the other, but the correlation is very, very, very strong. And I think in a lot of cases, like if you look at a guy like JaVale, that's been JaVale's problem his entire career.
Right.
It's great that JaVale gets good blocks. He does. But there are also plays where he's like a pogo stick and he jumps 2 or 3 times when he shouldn't jump at all. And that happens, And
he jumps sideways,
Moving on,
This
Jay
is
Crowder.
where it gets interesting. This is where it gets interesting. Right
this
here.
is where it gets interesting. So Jay Crowder last year played 33 minutes in the playoffs.
Yeah.
What say you?
It seems like too much. When it seems like too much within the context, I'm going to bring up another guy that we're going to talk about next, I'm sure, that Mikal Bridges played a whole minute less in 32.1 minutes per game.
It certainly feels weird coming off of a game last night where, and granted, this is because Cam Johnson and Jay Crowder even were out, but Mikal Bridges literally played 50 minutes last night.
Yeah.
He's also played the most minutes in the NBA this season. We've talked about that.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I understand that it's probably somewhat matchup dependent for the Suns.
sure.
Right? They played a lot of big wings throughout the playoffs, whether it be LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Paul George. Yeah, there was a lot of guys, and then of course Giannis in the finals. There's a lot of guys that Jay Crowder had to match up against. But here's a surprising stat: of all the Suns players who played minutes last year in the playoffs, the best plus minus, raw plus minus, which you can take with a grain of salt, was Jay Crowder. So while he did play basically the fourth most minutes on the Suns, he also had the best plus minus on the Suns, which I thought was kind of interesting. And it's like pretty significantly better than Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson, the other two wings that are likely going to get minutes this season. Now, having said that, arguably Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson have improved significantly. Jay Crowder, I think he's improved slightly, but like the jumps that Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson have made in the last year, I think, is what makes this specific wings conversation interesting. But having said all that, I just want to point out Jay Crowder averaging the fourth most minutes for the Suns last year at 33 minutes per game, and the Suns making to the NBA Finals is an excellent example of how important Jay Crowder is to this team and how Monty Williams clearly understands that. My first thought, though, is that feels like a little too much considering the lack of minutes for the other two guys that we're going to talk about next.
I understand that. That's, yeah. Jay's really fucking important. Just to address kind of what you were saying about that. Like, Suns fans underrate Jay all the time, and I do think, spoiler alert, but I'm kind of working on a video about this right now, and I'm waiting on an update to see how injured Jay is before we release it potentially, but Jay has improved this season for sure. So, as much as Mikal and Cam Johnson have improved as well, you can't say that Jay hasn't improved, because in year 10 or 11 or whatever he's in at this point, he's absolutely making strides to make sure that he stays relevant in this league. I'm going to move on from there. Cam Johnson, it's related to this convo, but 21 minutes, I'm going to assume you're going to say is far too low.
It feels too low at this point. It feels too low. Yeah.
And
I don't know that there's a way to get him to like 30 minutes per game.
I don't think there is.
At this point. Yeah. So, maybe something closer to 25 minutes per game.
Yeah.
And I think that'll kind of average out to, if you need Jay Crowder, you play Jay Crowder significantly more. And if Cameron Johnson's just on one night, you play him more. Cameron Johnson, raw plus minus, once again, was the only player of this rotation that is in the negative on raw plus minus data. Means the Suns are getting beat when he was on the floor more often than anyone else on the team that played a lot of minutes last year. And I think that has to do with the fact that he's coming off the bench and playing with other bench guys as well. But as we talked about with this, there's not a lot of bench guys playing, and Cameron Payne has a plus in the plus minus here for last year's playoffs. So it's just kind of interesting to look at those in context to the minutes. But he's improved. So having said all that, Cameron Johnson is the maybe the third best, fourth best offensive player on the Suns this year, just by the way that he's been playing. So it feels low to me.
Yeah, and I think I agree, for the record, that it feels low. I think to finalize exactly how much you're going to up his playing time, we need to wait. We need to hold off for a few minutes until we get to the other guys, and then we can land on a final number. We'll get there eventually. But just before we do that, last guy here, Cameron Payne. Technically, the number here is 19 that he logs for the entire playoffs. But I will say I'm docking that down to 17 because if you eliminate his two starts against the Clippers and only take into account the games where he came off the bench, which is like in this thought exercise kind of what we're doing, he played 17 minutes per game in the playoffs. So I'm going to stick with Cam Payne 17 as the initial number that we pencil in, and then we can alter it. How do you feel about that?
I like that.
Okay, so here's where we are, and we can make some alterations now if you'd like before we get to the other guys, or we can do it at the end. But with those 7 guys that we've decided are locks, again, those 7, in case you weren't paying attention, are Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, DeAndre Ayton, Cam Johnson, and Cam Payne. That adds up to 213 minutes out of 240 if we use exactly the same number of minutes that they played in last year's playoffs, which leaves 27 minutes remaining for either increasing their workload from where they already were or adding other players to the rotation. Only 27 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is not very many minutes at all.
Yeah.
Do you have any initial reactions to that number of 27? I mean, that's like, I think the way we go here, like, how many guys can reasonably fit into that number is, I think, the interesting thing about it. Like, is that 2 players at roughly 13 or 14 minutes per game? Is it 3 players at roughly 9 minutes per game?
Well,
like, what is that?
I mean, my initial thought process thinking about this would be slightly reducing Jay Crowder's minutes, slightly increasing Mikal Bridges, maybe like a minute to like 33, increasing Cameron Johnson's to like 25, like we briefly mentioned, and then splitting the final minutes between Torrey Craig and JaVale McGee.
Okay.
At that point, that's my first thought process. And the thought process being, right, JaVale McGee probably doesn't play very much if the Suns play the Clippers in the first round. Maybe Torrey Craig plays a significant role in that series, but then that could flip depending on the teams that the Suns play later on.
So it's okay. Before we talk more specifically about JaVale McGee, it sounds to me like you're landing on 9-man rotation. It sounds like you are team 9-man rotation. 10 guys would be too many in the playoffs.
I would say 9-man rotation
because
over the course of multiple series.
You could absolutely make the case with the number of good basketball players that the Suns have, and based on the number of players that they're playing right now, they could go into the playoffs and they could go into round 1 and play 10 guys. They totally could. But you are arguing that the
ideal
in the
first round
rotation is 9.
Yes, I would say that. Here's what I would say: these guys are definitely going to play roles in series if the Suns make it deep into the playoffs. These 9 guys, I think you can guarantee that. But there's always a chance for a Landry Shamet game. There's always a chance for a Bismack Biyombo game. Like there's always a chance. But
there's a chance. What I want to do next is. So here's where we are. We've got 27 minutes remaining, right? 2:13. Right. Based on what you just said, let's dock Jay Crowder by 2 minutes. Let's increase Mikal Bridges by those 2 minutes. Do you feel good about that?
Yes.
And then let's increase Cam Johnson by like 4 or 5 minutes to get him up to 25.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you feel? Do we feel
I just penciled
happy
in.
with that?
Even while you were speaking, I did Jay Crowder 30, Mikal Bridges 33, Cameron Johnson 25.
Okay. Jay Crowder 30, that's -3. Mikal Bridges 33, that's +1. And then Cam Johnson +4.
Yes.
So overall, that's going to be a net of +2 in the rotation for
those 3 guys.
For those 3 guys, which means we are now left with 25 minutes. And understand, guys, like not everything has to be this scientific about it, but I think like it's not going to look like this in every single game just because a guy averages a certain number of minutes. This is where it gets fun because now we can start talking about specific matchups, but we're just trying to land on a generally agreed upon number before we get into the nitty gritty. So 25 minutes remaining now is what we're looking at. We've got 7 players in the rotation. We've got 25 minutes remaining for what is generally accepted between the two of us as 2 players who get the remaining spots. We are in agreement so far.
Yeah.
Then what we are going to do now is systematically go through the remaining guys in the latter half of the Suns depth chart and decide exactly which 2 players deserve to split those remaining 25 minutes, how many of those minutes they deserve, and in what specific series you would like to see them use those minutes.
Can we start by just and reduce that 25 minutes by increasing Chris Paul's to 36 minutes per game?
We can absolutely do that. But would you would like to increase Chris Paul's without taking away from Cameron Payne? That's what you're saying?
Yes, under the assumption that Chris Paul can play with any sort of combination of Cameron Payne or Devin Booker, which they've done before, which they did in the playoffs briefly, and they could still do.
You are increasing Chris Paul to 36, but you are leaving Cam Payne at his average of 17. That leaves us with,
could go,
that leaves us with 23 minutes remaining for roughly 2 guys. Okay.
Yes.
So we've got that. We're ready?
Yes.
All right, let's dive into the final 5.
Okay.
I'm going to start lobbing guys at you,
and
we'll go back and forth.
It.
Bismack Biyombo.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one because, I don't know that he's going to play. Here's what I'll say.
I agree.
I think he's going to play, I should say. But I don't think he's going to play a regular role.
Yeah.
I just think there's going to be a game where people are, JaVale McGee's in foul trouble or even DeAndre Ayton's in foul trouble.
I mean, we literally saw this last night.
Or we can see a game where they want to play 2 bigs. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, a situation like last night where those guys get into foul trouble and Biz comes in. By the way, I thought Biz was really good last night when he came in. He did what he needed to do. Offensively, he's a step down from JaVale. We can be honest about that.
Look, Tyshawn Alexander played 1.3 minutes per game in the playoffs last year, technically. Because he played one game. Jalen Smith played 2.9 minutes per game in 6 games in the playoffs last year because technically he did play. So I think the question for us is, I think that we could still factor that in as a 0 for now, right?
Yes.
Even though it's still possible.
He sounds to me like a guy who's only going to get blowout minutes and have foul trouble minutes, which I wouldn't exactly count as being a part of the playoff rotation. However, they did the too big thing against the Bucks in that one game against the Bucks a few weeks ago, and it worked.
And I think with Chris Paul, it's going to work really well.
And I think
Chris Paul will make that work.
I think if they play the Bucks in the finals, they would do that again because it worked.
And Bismack's the one that can move his feet. I mean, Ayton can too,
way
but
better.
JaVale can't.
Way better. Biz moves his feet way better than JaVale. It's not even a competition. However, is that the only team, the only potential opponent that you could see them going 2 bigs against? Because for me, it is. Yeah.
I don't think the Nuggets... I don't think the Suns need to do that if they played the Nuggets. Let's see, looking at the Western
I think you can play
Conference
Jokic straight up.
I mean, the Timberwolves is kind of interesting.
I don't think you need to do that because, well, it depends.
If they just start hammering you on the boards, which they have the capability of doing, Cat not the best rebounder, but in the playoffs maybe. I don't know. I don't know that the Suns are even going to match up against them.
The thing about them is that the Timberwolves can absolutely hammer you on the boards, but they have questionable shooters that they play next to Cat. Like, it's either going to be like McDaniels or Vanderbilt kind of. If it's Vanderbilt, he's just going to straight up be in the dunker spot. He's not a spacing threat at all.
Yeah.
I love Vanderbilt, as you know, but it's different as a proposition than having to worry about Serge Ibaka or Brook Lopez lurking at the 3-point line if you're playing Milwaukee, which is a completely opposite situation.
Yes,
so I think that's interesting.
100%.
But I would be tempted to say that Biz is not playing except for maybe in a finals rematch, in which case he comes in handy. And I did say this the other day too, though. Just even if Biz doesn't play in the playoffs this year, first of all, he deserves credit for helping the Suns get through COVID and being spectacular in all of the minutes he's played this year. Yeah, fitting right in with the culture,
especially with Chris Paul. Yeah,
and being a spectacular human being in general. I'm a huge Bismack Biyombo fan now. With the Warriors now struggling, looks like James Wiseman. No one really knows what's going on with him. He might not come back, but the Warriors play small all the time out of necessity, and their fans are like kind of desperate for another option. Like, they need another big, an actual center. Just the fact that Bismack Biyombo is not a Golden State Warrior right now is such a win for Suns fans. And we should consider that the win that it is, because there's no doubt in my mind. When he said that he was coming back to the NBA, he was only interested in going to a team where he could win. Mm-hmm. He did tell his agent that. And I have no doubt in my mind that the Warriors needing a big right now, if James Jones didn't scoop him up when he did and then re-sign him quickly before they even needed to, Biyombo might be a Warrior right now, and that could be a much trickier proposition if you went up against them in a series versus, we'll talk about it, I guess, in a minute, but going up against their kind of smaller lineups. So.
It is so crazy that they picked Wiseman over LaMelo.
Yeah, I mean...
It's imagine that team with LaMelo. Maybe even not... I mean, this year they'd still clearly be good, but man, the future of that team would be insane. The rest of the NBA should be grateful that they picked James Wiseman in that scenario, although who knows what it'll be in the future.
All right.
Next guy.
Aaron Holiday.
I think he's going to get... I think we can count him as a 0.
You count him but you were very confident about that.
I just think he's the same kind of guy that... Look, if Chris Paul rolls his ankle, if Cameron Payne rolls his ankle, clearly he's going to play. But I just think that this team already has tons of guard strength up front. And it's Aaron Holiday, although he would be fine in a playoff rotation, there's just 3 guys that are better than him that are going to take those minutes.
He is shooting, let me pull it up real quick because I thought this was hilarious earlier. He's shooting 57% from deep as a Phoenix Sun.
Wild. And a lot of those are off the dribble.
I know. He's played awesome, dude. Like, I can't knock Aaron Holiday because he's shot the ball well. He's been a decent playmaker, not a bad assist to turnover ratio if you look at the numbers. He's defended really, really well at the point of attack. The main hang-up here is the only way to play him in the playoff rotation is he needs to be sharing the court with Cameron Payne. Yeah. And I don't think the offense necessarily falls apart if you do that, but he's 6 foot. So I think there's an issue there of is he, is an Aaron Holiday campaign pairing for even if it's only 4 or 5 minutes at a time in any playoff series against some team with bigger wings who are trying to work the right mismatches to get favorable isolations. Is that viable? And I think the answer is probably no. So I would tend to agree with you that Aaron Holiday, who is playing amazingly well, is not going to be in the playoff rotation unless something happens.
Okay.
I would agree.
So we have 3 guys left, right?
We've got 3 guys left.
We're just assuming Ish Wainwright's not going to be on the
Ish
on the
Wainwright.
roster,
I didn't even
Ish
Wainwright and Elfrid Payton. I didn't even talk about. If you want to talk about that, like the only thing I might say there is depending on how bad. Like, look, if Jay Crowder has a real injury, throw all this shit that we're talking about today out the window, right? So we're still waiting on an update. Like, if that's a real injury, given how bad Elfrid Payton played yesterday and the fact that we know Chris Paul is coming back soon, the Suns will need another roster spot, and I would not be at all surprised to see them cut Elfrid Payton before the end of the season and give that spot to Ish Wainwright just for some wing depth. I could see that. So I guess that's the only thing I have to say about that. Do you have anything to add there?
No, I think
that would not be an ideal situation for anyone. But
that's a really weird injury for Jay Crowder, by the way, because it didn't look like much on the replay.
He went to the locker room. He came back pretty quickly. He didn't seem to be in bad spirits, but also they won't give us an update, at least not at this point. So
even the update will be as vague as possible. The only thing I'm worried about in that case, not to concern troll here, is any sort of Achilles injury, even if it's not a major one. Achilles injuries tend to compound on each other, so if it's a minor injury, you have to be very careful with it going forward because a re-injury is a little more possible for something like that. So hoping it's minor, like a minor tweak of the ankle or something like that, but we'll see what that is once we find out. Or I don't know. We'll get some sort of update. But let's actually talk about there's 3 guys left, right?
Yeah, I'll turn it over to you at this point. Like, is there a guy you'd like to start with out of these 3?
I'd like to talk about all 3 of these guys together because right now we have 23 minutes left.
Okay.
Because my initial thought process is I'm just going to throw 11 minutes JaVale McGee's way. And that is essentially almost the entirety of the minutes where DeAndre Ayton's off the court.
Yep. I was going to say
minus a minute or 2.
The first thing I was going to say there is that leaves pretty much nothing for small ball except for maybe a few possessions here or there.
Yes.
Which I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a defensible position. But
Yes. But now I think, so I'll start with that. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, but I think JaVale's probably the guy here. I'll put it this way. I think JaVale is going to have the highest variance depending on matchup. He could just not
play a whole series, right?
I think
there's
JaVale,
a possibility.
There are 3 specific teams, the Golden State Warriors, the Utah Jazz, and the Los Angeles Clippers. And all of them you have a decent chance of seeing at some point. Yeah. Where I think you could just get away with not playing JaVale McGee.
And in those scenarios, you play Torrey Craig, or to be honest, there's a possibility where Bismack Biyombo actually earns some of those minutes based on his ability to chase people around.
What I will say are the circumstances in those 3 series are all different. Because I think if you're playing the Golden State Warriors or you're playing the Los Angeles Clippers, it's about neutralizing their advantage that they seem that they have from playing small ball, right? Like they would go small so that DeAndre Ayton's, first of all, I'll just say DeAndre Ayton's going to earn his minutes. There's no concept to me at this point of the Clippers or the Warriors being able to, quote unquote, play DeAndre Ayton off the floor because of his lack of offense if they go small. That's not going to happen.
I have no doubt that he's going to be fucking awesome.
DeAndre Ayton is going to
doubt.
DeAndre Ayton is going to feast on smalls with his 70% hook shot. We know this. He has developed this skill and he is ready to dominate it offensively in that sense. I'm not worried about it. JaVale McGee is a different story.
Yes,
JaVale McGee is a rim runner and a rim runner only, and I do think the Clippers or the Warriors' second units could go small and quote unquote play him off the floor and make his offense roughly useless. So if you do it in those 2 series, it's about neutralizing the advantage created by the other team. If you do it in the Jazz, it's a little bit different. You could have JaVale McGee match up with Hassan Whiteside or Eric Paschall or whoever they decide to throw out there and be totally fine. Like he could hold his own in those lineups, but that's an example where maybe you want to be the one to take the advantage by making the first move and playing Torrey Craig as small ball against the Utah Jazz because you know how effective that is against that team specifically, whether it's going up against, again, Hassan Whiteside or if it's going up against Rudy Gobert. So I think those are the three teams, but all of them, it would be a slightly different situation. Any other team, like JaVale, makes sense.
No, I agree with that. Yeah,
he makes sense. He makes sense in a Nuggets series. He makes sense in a Grizzlies series.
Yeah, I mean the Nuggets series would be a revenge series for him.
Yeah, I think he makes sense in a Dallas series too. But it's kind of 50-50 with this guy. And here's a stat to prove it, by the way. In the 3 games the Suns have played against the Golden State Warriors this year, JaVale is averaging 10 minutes per game. He averages 16 on the season, but only 10 minutes in those games. And so that just goes to show, first of all, Monty has not been a complete progressive in those games and deleted him out of the rotation and gone with only Torrey Craig or only Jay Crowder at the 5. Well, we didn't have Torrey Craig on the roster at that time, which is an important point too. But it has impacted his minutes in those games.
Okay, so the question there would be, should we just put it at 10 minutes instead of 11? Just based on what you just said.
For JaVale's tally? Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, let's do 10. So that leaves 13 minutes.
JaVale goes at 10, and there are going to be some series where he plays 15 or like 14, and some series where he plays 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I don't actually think there would be a series where he plays not at all, although it's possible. Monty would have to be like pretty progressive to do that.
Yeah, well, I would say that there's more likely a series where he starts maybe playing in the first few games and then ends up reducing his minutes to almost nothing as the series rolls along.
Right. That's what happened to Frank.
That tends to be what Monty does. 13 minutes left, and one huge question. Ife Lundberg, how many minutes? No, I'm kidding. 13 minutes. Now, the question for me is, essentially, do we give all 13 of those minutes mentally to Torrey Craig because Torrey Craig can play multiple positions? Or do we assume that Monty's going to at least try Landry Shamet in the majority of these series to see how it goes, and we try and split the minutes somehow between Torrey and Landry? Because my first inclination was to, I'll be honest, I gave 11 minutes to JaVale, 12 minutes to Torrey Craig. Now I reduced JaVale to 10, which sort of increased Torrey to 13, which I could see, right? Torrey was one of the only players that played all 22 games last year.
Well, you can't, again, because Torrey is the small ball 5. No one else is that.
And Landry can't play multiple positions. And we're assuming Cameron Payne plays the secondary guard spot next to Chris Paul.
I'm just saying
minutes.
Torrey and JaVale are intrinsically linked. You cannot take away minutes from JaVale without giving those same minutes to Torrey. So that's important.
So the question, I guess, is, are we giving Landry Shamet a 0 here and then assuming he only plays in certain scenarios where Monty thinks he needs him? That feels weird, right? It feels like he should play. They gave him a contract extension.
It's tough because, they gave him $10 million a year or whatever it is. So it's tough because as well as Landry is playing right now, and he is playing his best basketball of the season right now, and he is a solid defender, as we talked about a million times, and I'm not worried about that in a playoff series. That's not what's keeping him off the floor. But it seems like the best we could offer him here is like, you get a stint in the second quarter of here's 5 minutes and do the most you can with it. And then maybe you come back on the floor for 2 minutes at the end of the third quarter. It feels like we're carving out a role here of, okay, Landry, here's 6 to 8 minutes.
Okay.
How much can a shooter really do with that? So especially a shooter who has struggled with confidence.
Those are not Torrey Craig minutes then, right? Those would be trying to take some minutes out of Devin Booker's 40 minutes or Chris Paul's 36 minutes or Cameron Payne's 17 minutes at that point, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that is kind of interesting. So let's just pencil in 13 minutes for Torrey Craig. That feels about right. Let's see, what did he get last year? 12.1.
Here's one more question that I think is worth pondering. As good as Torrey Craig is in certain scenarios, because I would agree that Torrey is the only guy who can really be the small ball 5, but we're giving 12, 13 minutes to Torrey Craig. What's to stop Monty from just splitting those 13 minutes and giving 4 to Jay Crowder and 4 to Mikal Bridges and 4 to Cam Johnson? And now like Cam is playing 30 minutes if you do that. What's to stop him from doing that, and why shouldn't he?
It's 100% possible. Okay. I do think that's definitely possible.
Maybe I think
that's the hardest thing to predict currently in our current state before the playoffs actually begin, because a lot of what we're basing it on is historical data, and the historical data points to Torrey Craig getting minutes here. So that's tough. Here's what I'll say. I'm going to reduce Devin Booker down to 39. I'm going to reduce Chris Paul down to 34.
And you're going to give Landry 2?
And I'm going to give Torrey Craig 12, which is what he got last year.
All right.
And give Landry Shamet 4 minutes a game.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of weird when Landry comes in for because I could totally see this happening. He comes in for a 4-minute stretch, gets some cardio, doesn't look like extraordinarily out of place on defense, takes one shot. If he makes it, Suns Twitter explodes. If he misses the one attempt he gets in those 4 minutes, people will be like, oh, fuck you, Landry. Like it's just, it feels like an awkward role for a guy who's not going to be able to establish any rhythm whatsoever in that role. It's just going to be like imagine going through all of shoot-around and all of warm-ups just to get in a playoff game, like a super important playoff game, and you get one shot in like 4 minutes, and then
the tough part with Landry Shamet, it essentially boils down to who would you rather have on the floor, Devin Booker, Cameron Payne, or Landry Shamet. And obviously Devin Booker and Cameron Payne are better players than Landry Shamet in his current state. Although Landry Shamet does do a little bit more off the ball, so I think there is a chance we get some Landry Shamet, Chris Paul minutes instead of the Cameron Payne, Chris Paul minutes that we were predicting previously. So we'll see. I think that's a fair place to land for Shamet, and we can adjust it as the playoffs roll along.
I mean, I guess I could see him play as many as like 10 minutes in a first round. But
yes, when they play the main guys less minutes. I agree with that because a long playoff run means that when these early playoff rounds start, if the Suns are much better than the teams, which is possible, then they could play more like a 10-man rotation.
But in a Western Conference Finals or a setting or a final setting, he's not playing.
4 minutes is fair,
He's not playing.
Which 4 minutes in a series could mean that he played 10 minutes for 2 games and that's it, right? It's not necessarily that he's actually going to play 4 minutes a game. It's just that he's going to occasionally get minutes that average out to 4 minutes a game over the course of a series.
I think what we have more or less settled on here, and you can spit the numbers you have back at me.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the Suns enter the playoffs with a 9-man rotation, just like they did generally in the playoffs last year before they got up to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 9-man rotation. We've taken a couple minutes away from Jay Crowder. We've given a couple minutes to Cam Johnson in terms of like the internal development, handling stuff. But overall, the only difference is that you replace Dario Saric with JaVale McGee. Yeah. And the other 8 guys are the same 8 guys that played in last year's finals run. Biyombo, Holiday, Shamet, not really coming into play here unless there are some sort of really specific situations or maybe injuries. And on top of that, I would say that they enter with the 9-man rotation, but in some series we've also said maybe they cut it to 8 and JaVale isn't even really a factor either.
Mm-hmm. So it's fair to say that the theme of the season, which is internal development, will carry into the playoffs. Is that right?
Yeah, because all of these other moves, which were so important in order to maintain depth during the regular season to actually help you lock in the first seed. But when it actually comes to, are these guys that you've acquired on the margins, are they the 8 best players on the roster? No, they are not. And they've all had their moments. They've all been great at certain points. But if you force us to choose the best 8 players on the Suns or the best 9 players on the Suns, it's basically the same look as last year, just a little bit. You swapped out some of Dario's skill for JaVale's size. And otherwise, it's internal development.
I'm so ready for the playoffs after this conversation. Man, I am so ready for the playoffs. It's going to be really, really fun. We have already gone pretty long on this episode, so we'll go ahead and call it at this point. It's pretty fascinating. If you have ideas that you'd like to throw at us as far as who the Suns should play or maybe some quibbles with the minutes that we threw out here, I would love to hear them because oftentimes you guys have great ideas that we didn't even think of, so feel free to throw them at us. But we will be back with a regular Patreon episode. If you'd like extra content from us, you can sign up at patreon.com/thetimeline. We do extra podcasts every week, and we're doing another game this Thursday against the Denver Nuggets on Playback. Join us, watch the game with us. We'll be commentating on the game as it rolls along. We appreciate you guys, and we will be back very soon.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, blue label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to JohnnyWalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.